Just before we get into this video, guys, if you want to follow me on social media, on Twitter and Instagram, the links are here. And if you also want to support me on Patreon as well and help out my channel, that would be absolutely awesome as well. But let's get on with the video. Hey guys, it is Wingy here and welcome to a brand new video. Now, this is a video that I've been thinking about doing for a long time. However, I just couldn't really do it because it's really fucking hard to decide these type of things. So this is going to be my perfect series of Doctor Who. So what that means is I have got 13 episodes using all of the new series where I will build my dream series of Doctor Who. However, I've set myself some rules. If there is a multi-part story, I have to use every single part of that story. So that would rule out certain episodes that I really love the first part, but I just don't like the second part. So World Enough in Time as an episode by itself would be in this list. However, because I don't really like the Doctor Falls, it's not going to be on here. I've also tried to keep it so the episodes themselves are more or less the same episode number during their respective series, if that makes sense. So episode 1 is definitely in episode 1, episode 2 is in episode 2, etc, etc. Obviously this gets a bit harder because certain series, especially with two-parters, like episode 6 one year would be the second part of a two-parter, but another year would be a standalone episode. And then of course during the Peter Capaldi era, we've got a 12-episode series, and then of course in series 11 there's a 10-episode series. So it makes it somewhat harder in my head to kind of rearrange this, but I've tried my best. So we'll see. Like we'll just see how this goes. So episode 1, I'm going to go with the 11th Hour. Now I have said before that the 11th Hour is on a par with Spearhead from Space as the best post-regeneration story that we have ever had. I love everything about the 11th Hour. I think Matt Smith just hits the ground running. Amy Pond seems like a really cool companion from the get-go. There's a real sense of urgency and there's a great pacing to this story, and especially towards the beginning there's a real fairy tale aspect to it as well that I really enjoy. This is one of those episodes where before it was broadcast I was quite skeptical because at the time, I specify at the time, my favourite Doctor had just left. So I was kind of just like, I don't care about this new guy, like I don't give a shit. And then I watched this episode and I was like, who the fuck is David Tennant? Like, Matt Smith is the best thing ever. Stephen Moffat is the greatest writer of all time. Like, oh my god, this is amazing. This is a really good opening episode, and I think if I had to make my dream series, which is what I am doing, 11th Hour's got to be my episode number 1. For my episode number 2 then, I'm going to go with Into the Dalek. Now, if you follow me on Patreon, I recently did a review of this very episode. And I think with hindsight, after rewatching it a couple of times again recently, this is a very good story. At the time, I just thought it was a bit naff, like, oh, they're just drinking themselves into a Dalek, whatever. But looking back on it, that's not really what this episode is about. This episode is purely supposed to be an exploration of the Doctor's character. Like, obviously they set up in Deep Breath the fact that the Doctor is a much darker character now and he's a lot more morally ambiguous. And this story poses the question of, am I a good man? Which would eventually lead to the story arc. But if you treat it like that, if you treat this episode as a character piece for the Doctor, then this is fucking brilliant. Not flawless, I'm not going to say that this is the best episode ever because it's not. It's not even my favourite Capaldi episode. But I just really appreciate what this episode does, and I especially like the fact that they use a Dalek to sort of expand upon who the Doctor is now. Like, the Dalek is a perfect foil to the Doctor. It really brings out the best and the worst in him, and this one they really excel with telling that story. Like, the Daleks aren't necessarily the most important part of this. They're used very cleverly as a tool to expose where the Doctor's hearts really are, and I really appreciate that. And I think Capaldi is just perfect in this story. I don't think any other Doctor, maybe Eccleston, could have done this story. And also it's kind of a spiritual sequel to Dalek, speaking of Eccleston. So yeah, this has got to be my episode number 2 in my dream series. Number 3 is got to be School Reunion. Now this is just, I mean, as a classic series fan, I just love this one. Like, they bring Sarah Jane back. This was the first time I ever saw Sarah Jane, and it was because of this episode that I went back and watched classic Doctor Who, so I will always thank this episode for that alone. And whilst I don't think that the plot of this story is the best one ever, and that the Krillitanes are amazing villains, although Anthony Head in this story is very good, this story is just pure nostalgia for me, and it is a fun run around. And again, seeing a new side of the Doctor's character in this one, because you have Rose here, the current companion, and she's just like, oh well, you know, I've been travelling with this guy, he's amazing. What do you mean there are others? And then you sort of see the flip side of that, where you see Sarah Jane just like, yeah, you just left me and forgot about me, and now you're with somebody else. I like that. I like exploring the companion side of things, because the Doctor has had a lot of companions over the years, and obviously some of them die, but some of them leave on their own free will, and some of them just get left behind, and it's kind of cool to see the fallout from that. And it also leads to some funny comedic moments as well. So yeah, this one I have to put on there. And also K9 is just amazing. I love K9. I know a lot of people don't and just say that he's just stupid exposition and whatnot, but yeah, he's just a cute little robot dog, isn't he? Love him. And especially because Elizabeth Sladen did pass away, when you see that scene at the end where he's just like, my Sarah Jane, has a totally different context. Okay, so that was episode 3. Now this next story technically is episode 3 and 4 in its respective series, however, it's close enough, so allow it. A 2-part story, Under the Lake Before the Flood. So this is going to take up my episode 4 and my episode 5. But I've said before, this is, I think, a brilliant 2-part story, and I probably think the best Capaldi 2-part story. If it wasn't for Heaven Sent, which unfortunately won't be on this list because it does lead into Hellbent, I could have made an argument for it, but you know. But I think after Heaven Sent, this is the best story of Series 9 and one of the best Peter Capaldi 2-part stories. And, well, no, just Peter Capaldi stories in general, really. I've said before that I love the fact that this story sort of works in reverse, so the Doctor and Clara arriving and doing what they do in Part 1 doesn't really matter because of what the Doctor did in Part 2. However, what the Doctor did was influenced by him arriving in Part 1. It's so confusing when you say it like that, but it really fucking works. The ghosts in this story I think look really creepy with just the hollow eyes. The crew on the base I think are all really likable characters. The way that the story unfolds and you realise what the mystery actually is and what's actually causing it, I think is really interesting and really engaging. I mean, it's a base under siege story, which is just Doctor Who's bread and butter, and I love seeing it in the new series, especially in Capaldi's era, because his Doctor is very much a Doctor that would work in the classic era, so to see him in a sort of classic series style story just works. Clara isn't annoying and an overbearing cunt in this one, so that's also a plus. And yeah, I always find myself rewatching this. Like, if I'm going through Netflix to look for a Doctor Who story and I'm like, oh, I feel like a Capaldi one, I'll probably put this one on. So, episode 6, we are going to have to go with Dalek. Now, there is no other episode 6 in any other series that would take this spot, because Dalek is one of the greatest pieces of Doctor Who that we have ever had and are ever likely to see. I don't need to really talk about this one, do I? Because you all know, you've seen it. It's great. Christopher Eccleston, alone in a room with a Dalek. There you go. Genius. That is enough reason for this to be here. I mean, I could go on and explain more, but at this point, I don't think I need to. Dalek is just fucking mint in it. So, I have kind of broken my own rules here, because usually in a series of Doctor Who, particularly during the Russell era, there would be 3 2-part stories. However, in my dream series, there's going to be 4, and this is the first... No, we've already had a 2-parter. Fucking Stephen Moffat messing with the way that Doctor Who is structured. Like, this has made it so much harder. Anyway, the next one that we are going to be going for is Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead. So this is going to make up, I believe, if I'm just looking at my list correctly, yeah, this is going to be episodes 7 and 8. Now, this is my favourite David Tennant story. I absolutely love the library story. I think it's really dark. I think it's got some really great ideas in it. I love Donna. I love her and the Doctor. I just think their chemistry is so good together, and I think Donna has some really great moments throughout this entire story, particularly in Part 2 where she's in her own sort of dream world, and then when she's told that it isn't real, she's just like, oh, for God's sake, I've been dieted. Just like such a natural human response. It's just so funny. This also introduces us to River Song, who obviously would later go on to be a very crucial part of the Doctor's life. However, she wasn't an annoying prick in this one like she usually is, so yeah, I can take River in this one, and I liked at the time trying to figure out who she actually was and why she was so important. I also like the fact that the Doctor didn't give up. He wasn't just like, well, she's dead then. Wait, no. If she's so important to me, I wouldn't have let her die. I love that. I love that aspect. The Vashta Narada, like I say, I think are really creepy. And again, it's something that Doctor Who does best, which is take something from the real world and turn it into a scary monster. This time being shadows. Steve Pemberton is in this one as well, which I love inside Number 9 and League of Gentlemen, so Yeah, I like that. And overall, I think this is one of Stephen Moffat's best scripts. Not his best script, but one of his best scripts. So yeah, this is a really, really solid David Tennant story. My favourite one, in fact. I say really solid, but it's the one I like the most. So I said that I cheated because I've included an extra two-parter in this, and that's because, like I say, the library story is my favourite Tennant story, so that had to be here. But in terms of like a mid-series two-part story, you can't overlook The Empty Child and The Doctor Dances, which of course is going to be my episodes 9 and my episodes 10. Like with Dalek before it, you can't really argue this one. Everybody likes this story. Now some people might say, oh well actually it is a bit overrated. It's still fucking brilliant. Like honestly, someone try and argue how this isn't a really, really great Doctor Who story. I'll wait. Like, I will read all the comments. If people are just going to say like, yeah, this isn't a good Doctor Who story, you explain to me why it fucking isn't. Anyway, this is just a really great story. This had to be in my dream series of Doctor Who because this is the one where I watched it as a kid. It terrified me to death, but I had to keep watching. This was the story that made me realise I was going to be a fan for life. You have a great villain, you have a great setting. It introduces us into Captain Jack Harkness, who obviously would later go on to be one of the greatest creations in Doctor Who history. Eccleston is on fire. I love his scenes with Nancy and with the kid at the end. Like, it's just such an optimistic ending that I love. Just pure genius. This is probably Moffat's best story. So for episode 11, I haven't really had too many 11th Doctor stories. In fact, so far I've only had the 11th hour, so I had to rectify that, and I'm going to say Vincent and the Doctor. Now the funny thing is, I'd totally forgotten about this episode, and I feel really bad because this episode is truly fantastic. This, I think, is one of the most heartfelt and touching Doctor Who stories that we have ever had and are probably likely to have. What I love about this story is that it's very much a metaphor for depression, but it doesn't do it in a way where it sort of over-explains it. It doesn't do it in a way where it makes it obvious that that is what this story is about. I mean, maybe you can find it really easy to interpret that way because obviously there's the invisible monster that is burdening Vincent van Gogh, but I think if you weren't sort of looking for that meaning and you were just watching it as a Doctor Who story, you wouldn't really pick up on it. And I love the fact that this episode is subtle in its execution and it handles it beautifully. Like, obviously depression and mental health is a very touchy subject. It's not something that you can take lightly, so the fact that this episode did touch upon it, but in a way that is not only respectful, and yet it's still very much a Doctor Who story at the same time. It juggles a lot of things, and yet it still manages to do everything it's talking about, as well as the programme it's actually in, justice. So I love that, and I think Tony Curran's performance as Van Gogh is just phenomenal. The scene at the end where he's taken back to the museum, fucking brilliant. But what I also love is the fact that, contrary to what I said about The Empty Child and The Doctor Dances, this episode doesn't have a happy ending. Sometimes, no matter what you do, no matter how good things could end up being, it's not enough. And that's a lesson that Amy learns in this story, and it's just a beautiful 45 minutes of television. Even if it wasn't Doctor Who, this is just brilliant. And then lastly, we are going to be talking about a two-part story. Now, I could overlook pretty much every single finale because I'm not really massive on all of them. Some are better than others, of course, but I think the best one has got to be Bad Wolf, Parting of the Ways. And I've just realised that this list is very Dalek heavy. However, fuck it. Now, this is definitely the best series finale. Like, everything about it I love. Obviously, some of the game show references have dated somewhat. A lot of kids nowadays who would rewatch this story would just be like, what the fuck is Trini and Susanna? But if you overlook that, you've actually got a very, very good Doctor Who story. Now, I like the fact that we return to somewhere that we had been previously in this series, and what I like even more is the fact that the Doctor being there actually made things worse. So when he comes back to that place in the future, he's just like, oh shit. I also like the fact that there are a lot of Daleks in this story, and they are just brutal, and they are just gunning people down. Even characters that we like, such as Linda with a Y, like, they come in a really creepy way and just kill her. Obviously, we saw how scared of the Daleks the Doctor is in Dalek earlier in this series, and in my series as well, funnily enough. But this one really kind of ramps it up in places, and it shows you the true might of a Dalek empire. It shows you the Dalek Emperor again, which I think is pretty cool. Overall, just pretty much the best finale, I think. And in my head, like when I thought of the last two episodes, I just couldn't think of another story, so it had to be this one. So that is going to be it from me. That is going to be my perfect series of Doctor Who. Obviously, you might have noticed that there's been nothing from Series 11 in this. I mean, if you've heard my review, I didn't really like Series 11 that much, which I know these days is sacrilege privilege. I mean, because I didn't like Series 11, maybe I should just get the fuck out of fandom, who knows. But in the comments below, guys, let me know what your perfect series of Doctor Who would be. Obviously, you can kind of use the guidelines that I did, or you can just literally pick 13 episodes that you really love from the new series and make your dream series, or you can use my guidelines and whatever. And yeah, just let me know in the comments, because I'm really interested to hear what you guys have to say on this one. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like on it. Subscribe for more. Social media and Patreon is in the description below, so if you want to follow me on any of those things, then I would absolutely love you forever. But until next time, guys, you take care of yourselves. Goodbye. I'm gonna get in so much shit for that joke, but it's too fucking funny to resist.